Hello, everyone. Yeah, you should be mute. That's right. So you can wave your hand if your video is on, or I will assume that you're waving if your video is not on. Want to quickly just thank you all so much for coming to this virtual presentation of Hold That Thought. Many of you I can see probably wouldn't be able to visit us in person on the spur of the moment like that, but we are glad that you're joining us virtually. We're really excited about our conversation on tonight. And we're gonna do a quick invocation. I see that our board member, Reverend Oliver Chambliss, is on. Let me see if I can get him to unmute.
Hey, Father God, in the name of Jesus, we just say thank you, Father God. Thank you for another day, Father God. Another day is to praise your name, Father God. Give you all the praise, honor, glory, and thanks. Father God, we receive, Father God, in this meeting this afternoon, Father God. We ask you to be in the midst. They say we're two or more that gather, agree upon one thing, you be in the midst. So we ask you, Father God, to be in the midst and God and do in the right direction we need to go, Father God, because we can't do nothing without you, Father God, because you are everything. In your name we pray, amen.
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 All right. All right. Teamwork does indeed make the dream work. All right. So, like I said, we're really glad to be here. I want to, number one, acknowledge our sponsors for this evening. We got a generous grant from the Mississippi Humanities Council. It was ARPA funds. And we wanted to do a discussion series that would kind of look at genres in the arts from slightly off-kilter perspectives. So we've done something with gospel music, we've done something with horror movies, we've done something with stage plays, and now we are about to talk about Blaxploitation films. So it's been a wonderful train ride, and now we're about to bring it on home, as they say. First, though, I'm going to ask my colleague and board member, Donna Hayden, to give us our little housekeeping for the meeting today.
Hello, everyone. How's everyone? Wave your hands. Just a few online etiquettes that we want to take care of right quick. The first thing that we ask is, if you are on, if you don't mind, could you please put your email address in the chat? If you will put your email address in the chat for us, we would appreciate it. Second thing is, please keep your phones on mute if you are not one of the presenters. And along with keeping the phone on mute, just try to silence your cell phone just in case something happens and your phone gets off mute. Your phone won't ring or anything like that. So we ask that you put your cell phones on mute if possible. And I think that is it. We are ready to go. Thank you very much, Madam President.
You are so welcome. One other thing was probably going to be two, but also, if you do have questions for the presenters as we go through our discussion, drop those in the chat and ask them out loud. Actually, they can probably see the chat and address them as well. So put your questions in the chat, and that way we can have a nice interactive discussion. It won't feel like a lecture. You won't have to think that you're in school. There won't be a test. The other thing is, in light of, in regard to our sponsors, in addition to the Mississippi Humanities Council, we certainly want to thank our local sponsors who help us keep the doors open. And that would be the often referred to as the great state of Claiborne, the Claiborne County Board of Supervisors, and the great city of Fort Gibson, who do provide us as a nonprofit, our local community support. And of course, the generous support of individual donors, organizations, clubs, etc. But individuals also help us keep the doors open so that we can keep bringing programming like this to our community. So we're going to drop a link in the chat also that you can certainly find us on Facebook, and there are plenty of opportunities to give that way. We've got a major fundraiser in progress called the Southern Gents Calendar Fundraiser. It's a fun little thing where we're celebrating some local male heroes in our community. And you can purchase a calendar, you can just give a donation, you can give a general donation. And I'm going to drop a PayPal link in the chat as well. So that said, I'm going to ask our presenters, starting with Logan, Maximus, Christopher, to just kind of go in that order and give us a brief introduction of yourselves. And as I said to them before I let you guys in, if they miss any of the juicy details, I will feel free to share those, but just tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Okay. And real quick, just a heads up, I worry that my internet reception, I'm in the basement of my home. I'm worried that it's going to be a little unstable. If I, for some reason, freeze up or drop out, I'm going to switch to my iPhone and just use a hotspot. So I hope it doesn't happen. But if I do disappear, I'm coming back, and I should be able to come back with a more stable connection. But anyway, thank y'all so much for having me. It's such an honor and a privilege to be able to join y'all for this conversation. My name is Logan Wiedenfeld, as y'all can probably tell. My name's written underneath my picture. I'm a professor, or assistant professor of English at Alcorn State University, right down the road from Mississippi Cultural Crossroads. I work with film, not only film, but I do some work with film. I teach film at Alcorn, and I've written about film. I teach a class at Alcorn on African-American cinema, and Blaxploitation is one of the areas that we cover. It's a fascinating area to talk about, and I'm excited to have this conversation. I'm married, I have 3 children. I love books, I love ideas, I love art, I love movies, bad ones, good ones, you know, I'll watch them all. Anything else? What am I missing? The any juicy details that I'm withholding that I should?
That you were a part of our discussion on horror films with Dr. Tannery Dew.
That's right. That's right. And that was excellent. I had so much.
And your student, whose name I can't recall, so give her a shout out.
Yes. Autumn Winters.
Autumn.
Yeah. The horror panel was fantastic, and I had a ball with that conversation, and I hope some of the audience members are also attended that. I mean, there's going to be some overlap.
Exactly.
When we talked about horror, we talked about like Blackula and Blackula 2. So those are Blaxploitation films.
I thought it was really cool when Logan and I had initial conversations, and he said he liked all film, good and bad.
I do.
How do you know good if you don't have anything to compare it to?
Right.
All right, Maximus.
Yes, thank you all for having me. I'm totally honored to be here with this esteemed panel. My name is Maximus Wright. I'm a father of 4, Jamie, Jeremiah, Zacharias, and Jordan. I'm an empty nester finally, so that's a great treat. I've been a filmmaker for about 7 years. I'm the executive director of the Jackson Film Festival. And currently we're on a mission to create 100 filmmakers in the state of Mississippi in the next 7 years.
Okay, that is the juicy part that I shared with the people at the stage play, Hold That Thought, which was just last week.
Okay.
that the cool thing about Maximus is that he's primarily interested in sharing the platform, sharing the gift, bringing others up, giving other people an opportunity to do just what he does, even if they're better than him. But bringing out the best in people, bringing out the potential in people, that is such a cool exploit. And one of the things that we like to do at Cultural Crossroads is bring these talents, gifts, professionals, et cetera, together and to our community. So we're glad to have you. On that note, Christopher.
Thank you. I am also honored and privileged to be here with you guys this evening. It's always great to just, to give back and to share. I've been on almost this long journey for about 40 years out in Los Angeles. Wow. So I've been doing this for a minute. I've been basically at the forefront of casting out in Hollywood. And over the last 7 years or so, I've been moving more towards the producing side of it. But it has definitely been a journey. I've done some awesome movies I've been a part of, such as Black Panther. I've been a part of I Still I Got a Groove Back. If you want to go back there, Amistad. Wow, what else can I tell you? It's just a numerous group of movies that I've done, that have contributed to this society. So there you go.
There you
what
go.
You want.
Awesome. So as you can see, we have a diverse and gifted group of panelists to talk about this topic. And we've been tossing around the term Blaxploitation film a lot. And a lot of people don't remember exactly what that is. They didn't say they didn't remember, but we remember the movies a lot of times, but we don't necessarily count them in a genre if we haven't taken Dr. Wiedenfeld's class. So Dr. Wiedenfeld, give us a little history there, kind of a brief overview of how that genre started and what characterizes a Blaxploitation film. What makes it a Blaxploitation film as opposed to anything else?
That's a tough question. We can talk about Blaxploitation. That's much easier, but to situate it within the history of American cinema is a difficult question. I would say, first of all, that what preceded Blaxploitation, and when we talk about Blaxploitation, we're talking about a group of films made primarily during the 70s that were produced, written, and catered to some degree, often problematically, to a Black audience. What preceded Blaxploitation, what Blaxploitation took the place of, we call race films. And race films, that's Oscar Micheaux, that's Spencer Williams. These were movies that were made outside of the scope of Hollywood. They were movies that were much more, they were controlled by African-American creators. African-Americans wrote the screenplays. They starred in the films. They directed the films. And with Blaxploitation, there's a shift. Hollywood sees that the burgeoning Black middle class is a slice of the American pie that they could get money from. So historically, up until that point, Hollywood had been pitching almost all their films to white audiences. And Blaxploitation is a shift away from that model. They started, Hollywood directors, mainly with low budgets, start to make films that are catered towards Black audiences. The tricky and kind of problematic thing, about which I'm sure we'll have much to say today, or this tonight during this conversation, is that the bulk of these films were written and directed by white directors and white screenwriters. So there's a big break between the older race films, which are wonderful, by the way. If you ever get a chance, like the Criterion Collection has some wonderful, wonderful movies that, you know, for the longest time you couldn't find. I highly recommend checking them. I highly recommend checking them out. But in any case, Blaxploitation were movies that were produced in Hollywood, that were aimed at Black audiences. Exploitation films are, you know, is a play on the word exploitation. Exploitation films come about as what is it? The MPAA, the rating organization, starts to shift, and all of a sudden you can have like lurid violence, you can have nudity, you can have sex scenes, and exploitation really takes that and runs with it. Exploitation films, and Blaxploitation kind of piggybacks on that and integrates a lot of these formerly these aspects of cinema that, like in the 50s, you couldn't do it.
Right.
You couldn't film Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. You couldn't film Coffee in the 50s or 60s. But in the 70s, you could. And so I guess, you know, long story short, they're Blaxploitation to the extent that they have elements of exploitation films, but they are catered to a Black audience.
So the idea was there were cultural stereotypes that were easy to develop, and these mediocre storylines that come together, and they were just, as you said, low budget, quick hit type movies that gradually got worse in quality and got more extreme in what they were showing as a result of loosening of these standards, the lessening of the standards. And so that said, do you talk about in your class the backlash that these films eventually faced from the Black community?
To some degree, yes. I mean, Blaxploitation, and I think, what is the title of this panel? I should know it.
The love-hate relationship.
There you go. Love-hate. There is an ambivalence. There is a kind of mixed feelings that I mean, for example, you know, I rewatched Foxy Brown this morning, and you know, some of it's wonderful. You know, you have a Black heroine. You know, Pamela Grier, she's a fantastic actress.
Exactly.
She crushes it in so many of those films. And she's also a woman, excuse my language, badass. Which is to say, like, she is a figure that is pretty much unprecedented up until that point. You didn't have women running revenge films, or they were pretty uncommon. So on the one hand, Blaxploitation does some really interesting things, but on the other hand, given the fact that they are, you know, these are commercial, these are commodities.
Exactly.
They are commodities, they're low budget, they're meant to make money.
Make money.
They spit them out quick. You know, the production value is low. They're just intended to pile up cash, and you know, the actors are often, you know, they're underpaid, have little experience. So, you know.
And I think there's an author, and I think it's Yvonne Sims. I should have looked it up before we started. But I think her name is Yvonne Sims. But she did a book. It probably started as a dissertation that evolved into a book on the women of Blaxploitation films, and it talks a lot about how these women at a point tried to distance themselves from their Blaxploitation film history, and how some of them had difficulty making the transition, finding roles or getting roles in the once Blaxploitation films kind of died out, getting roles in different kinds of films, breaking free of the stereotype. And I thought that was kind of interesting, because I think Pam Grier was probably one of the ones, certainly she was one of the ones who had great success in breaking from that genre, and then successfully, as you just said, carrying forward the female heroine, the making it realistic that the female heroine would be able to be believable in a new context. And not only that, but the African-American female heroine. So I think that was very interesting. Christopher, I find the casting director role really intriguing, because how do you know who's going to be the right person for the job? What are your thoughts on actors who played stereotypes and then had to, or desired to, try to break free of those stereotypes? I think of one person in particular just comes to mind, J.J. Evans, Jimmy Walker. You just can't hardly see Jimmy Walker playing anything else because everybody thinks he's J.J.
I think, I think, someone like J.J. Walker, they stayed too long in the episodics that they were doing, and then it just became an iconic figure, just to be that guy. So now that the American public sees him, that's what their mind immediately goes to. We try to, as casting directors, is try to support them as much as we possibly can by putting them in projects that are a little bit different than their character that they've played for such a long time, and then give them a chance to break out and create something new. So that's one of the ways that they can do it. Getting back to your first part of your question, it's all about money at the end of the day, and it's all about butts in the seats. So when we're casting a film, we are looking, number one, for the first two main actors. Those two main actors are going to be the drawing card for the movie. So if we are putting Denzel Washington in the movie, then Denzel Washington, it doesn't matter what the movie's about. He has a following, so people are going to flock. Same thing with Will Smith or whoever. It doesn't really matter what the movie's about or how good it's going to be or how bad it's going to be. If you are a fan of that actor, you're coming to that movie. So at the end of the day, we have to look out for the investors who've invested money into the project and want to recoup their money. So the best way to recoup their money is to put butts in the seat the first day the movie comes out, so they can recoup their money. So that's basically the concept of trying to get the right actor before the camera. Now having them be the right for the part is definitely a part of it. Making sure that they fit what we're looking for is definitely a part of it. But at the end of the day, it's about having a name talent. I was sitting today with Takashi Buford. I'm not sure if you guys know of that name or who he is, but he's the gentleman who wrote Set It Off. If you remember that movie, and he wrote the Tiger Woods story and a couple of other things going on. And we were talking basically about that. It's just trying to identify, because I'm helping them cast the project right now, just trying to identify someone that would be a name draw, that would secure his investors' money.
And do you consider things like, because I know you guys know almost everybody, if not everybody, but chemistry, how people are on set. Are they high maintenance? Are they team players?
Well,
and
all
that
that
kind of thing.
all that comes into play, but it takes a back seat to the money. It takes a back seat to the drawing
Okay.
board. You know, you're hoping that the chemistry is going to be there, and there is some casting sessions where we actually do a chemistry meet.
Okay.
You know, if we have a leading man or a leading woman, you know, you have to make sure that that's going to work between the two of them. So we might have a pre-chemistry meet, pre-chemistry read where we see how they move with each other. If it's well, great. If it's not, then we've got a problem. We got to go back out and recast. So
Awesome.
chemistry does play, a role in it, trying to make sure that's right.
Okay. Maximus, we've got a question here that I think was tailor-made for you.
Oh, wow.
Talk a little bit about the challenges involved in getting a story out to the public. We're talking about the primary goal kind of is making money. You want something that makes money, but all the time that doesn't jive with the desire to put a story out that's important to you or personal to you, or that needs to be told. A lot of times, whether it's stereotypical or not, sometimes the cultural portrayal, and it doesn't have to be just African Americans, the cultural portrayal of certain characters is portrayed that way because it's marketable more so than it is accurate. And in some cases, it can be hurtful. So how do you balance, I guess you could say, the desire for your project to potentially get known, get recognized, be marketable, and telling an authentic story?
How do I decide which which project I choose? Based on whether it's marketable or whether it conflicts with my moral compass. Is that kind of close to what you?
That's close enough. That's a good start.
Sometimes people take jobs because they need money. This is some people take jobs, whether it's crew or actors. Sometimes this is how they're paying their bills. Now, uniquely here to Mississippi, because Mississippi is not a leader in film yet.
Yes.
We're building the ground. I have to be very careful about what I choose because I can't feed into the stereotypes of certain things to make people doubt what we're trying to produce. We're being very thoughtful about creating a brand and presenting projects that people say, wow, they came out of Mississippi, because a lot of times you have those strikes against you. I've had people to come and ask me to participate in slave pictures, and I chose not to. Not because I have a thing against slave pictures, but because of what I feel my mission is. It doesn't fit into the direction in which we're going. I don't knock people who take whatever job, hey, somebody made a whole lot of money off of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Somebody made a whole lot of money off of that. And, I think it really comes down to the individual. It's just, if this is just a job and you're just trying to pay bills, that's one thing. But what I feel that I'm called to do, I think is more than that. So, but money is important. You can't do anything without money.
Right. Right.
We have to respect that it's a business. If it's something I've written, then I have a lot of control of that. But if it's something that I've taken on that someone else has invested their money and they call me in to direct or to produce, then I have to just do my job. I have to be a professional and do my job and ultimately give them the best I can if I decided to sign a contract, that deal memo, to push it forward. So it just depends. It depends on the person and ultimately what they're trying to accomplish.
Okay. Logan, let me ask you this, because I'm kind of seeing a pattern going here. What would you describe it then as the role of academia as, influencing potentially young filmmakers, young actors and actresses? I mean, when they come to your English class, they're not coming there as a, Shakespeare or whatever. But since we don't know the direction that they will ultimately go, the things that we're teaching and discussing in class that we're kind of shaping their minds around may indeed have some impact on what they go on to do and how they perceive, even as a consumer, how they perceive. I know I took a class and it was about movies. I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, it changed the way I looked at film. I couldn't just look at a film anymore. I saw all these other nuances and details and how they shot it, camera angles and all of this kind of stuff. So what role do you think that academia and scholarship play in shaping the perceptions that young people go forward with?
That's a great question. You know, film studies as a discipline is relatively new. It's historically been collapsed under literary studies, which makes sense. I mean, I would make the case that, and I tell my, like when I teach intro to literature, I include film because as far as I'm concerned, film can absolutely be literary. Films are texts, which is to say films are comprised of different parts that are interwoven together to make a whole. In the same way that a novel is, you know, a text, you know, it's a series of sentences, it's a series of words, paragraphs, chapters, etc. So, you know, one of the things that I want to impress upon my students right off the bat is that we tend to think of films as exclusively, you know, I don't think my students are thinking of them as commodities, but we tend to think of them as things to entertain us. And we often fall short of thinking of films as having the capacity to stir us in powerful artistic ways, in the same way that, you know, like a Invisible Man or Raphael's novel can. So, you know, I want to disabuse my students of this idea that films are distinct from literature, that they are just for entertainment. And one way to do that is to teach them how to watch a film. And part of that involves what you were referring to, you know, teaching them how everything is deliberate, you know, every camera angle, you know, I'll often, when I talk about narrative, I'll often talk about, this isn't a Blaxploitation film, but it is an exploitation film. A film called Straw Dogs. Are y'all familiar with the movie Straw Dogs? It doesn't matter. There's a point early in the film, like within the first couple minutes, you get the establishing shot. It takes place in England, and you know, you have this kind of panoramic shot of this village in England, small town, rural countryside England, and the camera starts to hone in on this little cottage, and it enters the door, and then for a brief moment, the frame settles on this big bear trap. You know, like the big claw clanking bear trap. You know, you'll know what I'm talking about. Like you step in it and it goes whack like that.
Yeah.
So narrative within film is so deliberate that there's no throwaway shot. There's no throwaway. I mean, everything is there for a reason. So I tell my students, like, you see that camera settle on that bear trap, you better count on somebody's going to end up in that bear trap. Like it's gonna have a role. You know, if the camera settles on like an antique musket on the mantelpiece, somebody's going to be firing that musket. Same with a samurai sword or whatever. So film is deliberate, it's calculated, it is it's very much a work of art. And it really has the capacity to affect us in profound ways. There are movies that are, I think, made just to make a buck, you know, throw a bunch of stars in there, have kind of a predictable narrative, you know, a lot of genre films, for example. And that's fine. That doesn't mean that they're bad films or anything, but there are also films, and I would point to, like, as far as Blaxploitation films go, I think like the arch Blaxploitation film, Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, which is often considered to be like the beginning of the genre. I mean, that is a killer film. It is amazing. It is groundbreaking. I mean, there's nothing more avant-garde than Melvin Van Peebles' Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. That thing it's an amazing film. It's hard to watch, but it's still, I mean, it's a work of art. It is a work of art. So I want my students to leave my classroom with the understanding that film is complicated, that to view a film properly, they need to, and I say properly, I mean, that's not the right way of putting it. To view a film analytically, you want to think about how it is constructed, how a film is in fact a construction of a bunch of different parts, and it's cobbled together to make a whole. And of course, we don't view it as a composite, you know, like Alfred Hitchcock made this film called Rope, where there's no, I mean, there are some cuts, but he tried to make it where it was like one long scene. There are cuts, but he like hides them. That's how we view films. We get absorbed within them and we forget that we're watching something that is a fabrication, a bunch of different parts. So, you know, opening my students' eyes to the artifice of film, to the way that it's constructed, I think it goes a long way towards helping them to appreciate it.
So Maximus, what do you think about Logan's point with regard to how the film is constructed in the act of storytelling? You know, you have the whole big picture, you know the story you want to tell, but you've got to figure out the right scenes and the right words and the right phrasing and all of these kind of pieces that got to go together to convey the story in a compelling kind of way.
Well, you know, it's all about manipulation. You know, you're trying to control the emotions and the attention of the audience. But to speak about Sweetback, I didn't see Sweetback initially. I saw the making of Sweetback first, Mario Van Peebles project. And it was from that that gave me the courage to make my first film. So after I saw Mario's version of Sweetback telling the story, I said, oh, this is a hustle. Oh, I know, I know how to hustle if independent filmmaking is hustling, then, oh, I can do this.
I can do this.
So watching that, and to your point, going back to finally watch Sweetback after I watched the making, I realized something about a filmmaker. You have a story that you're trying to tell, that you've written and that you planned, but based on what you film, you have to make a story with what you got. Sometimes he's laughing because he knows exactly what I'm talking about. Because you planned this great project, but when you get through filming, like in the case of Sweetback, sometimes they ran out of film and there were certain scenes they couldn't get. So now, how do I take what I have and make a story out of that? And sometimes that's a heartbreaking thing. Sometimes that's a mind-bending thing. But that is that's the art form. You know, to see what he did with the project is amazing because he ran out of money. He kept running out of money for one. He kept running out.
Identify with that, can't you?
Yeah, I actually can identify with it because I ran out of money several times. And I had to do everything from stage plays to selling books and donating blood to get it finished. So when you see what he's done, when you see the thing that I admire most about the artists of Blaxploitation, and I think it needs to be case studies that every independent filmmaker needs to watch, Willie Dynamite, Superfly, the Mac, Badass, the Making a Badass, because what it does is it teaches the type of tenacity that you have to do this. So how do you tell the story that you want? How do you do it with less? Because the other problem is like, yeah, you want to shoot these angles, but sometimes you don't have the equipment or you don't have the personnel to help establish the type of shot or the mood that you're trying to make from this. You know, even in Sweetbacks, when they had that fire scene, they were still in shots. They knew that the fire truck was coming. So they say, pull out the camera. We're going to act like this scene is part of it. So the art of manipulation is just on a level that is far beyond what most people can even imagine to tell these stories. And from that, these guys were phenomenal. So like I say, it's a lot of effort in trying to tell the story, but what I think they're masters of, and what we have to learn how to become masters of, is how if we don't get the shots we need, how do we take that and still continue to tell the story and manipulate the emotions and the hearts and the heartstrings of the audience.
Okay. Christopher, you look like you're ready to jump in without a question, so come on.
Hey, I'm just listening to this young man as he talk about, the process of movie making and the things that you go through to make sure that these projects come to fruition. I mean, it's amazing what some of these, producers out here are able to do with little. So it takes a village, really. It takes everybody coming in and supporting the effort of the project. You have to have a heart for the project. You got to know where that project's going. And even for the actors, it takes them a minute because they have to transform into a character that's going to give you the realism that's going to make you believe in that moment that they are that character. So the whole team comes together, and just, a lot of times I try to reach back and help other young artists coming up or young filmmakers coming up and try to support them without taking some pay myself. That's one of the reasons why I'm laughing, is because you want to see them do something good and you want to support them, as much as possible. But when you get going back to money, when you get folks who don't know this industry who try to invest in your project, well, they're investing in an intangible that they're not familiar with. They're familiar with stock. They know how that goes. But if you ask somebody to invest in a movie, they get to be very wary about that whole venture. So it becomes a process of just really putting it all together. It's interesting that, I work with Mario, and Mario, is true to his dad and the stuff that they've done together. So it's definitely a work in progress, to make things happen.
And you led to one of the questions that I wanted to ask. We always, when we do these kind of things, we want to have some motivational impact on the next generation, the folks that are coming along now who are just beginning to aspire to these various careers that in some instances they don't even know anything about. And as
Right.
Mississippi is developing its film industry,
Right.
there's so many different occupations that people can go into. You don't have to be in front of the camera. There are positions with the camera and behind the camera and before it starts and post-production and all these kind of things that that may not be available to the younger people. If maybe if students knew that these were possibilities, they would choose those or choose to go in those kind of directions. What kind of encouragement would you give to young people who want to be somewhere in the movie industry some kind of way? And what kind of thing maybe could we be doing or should we be looking at doing in terms of increasing the awareness and the early exposure that young people get?
Well, one of the things I would say, get in Logan's class. Definitely,
I would agree with that.
Yeah, you got to get in Logan's class because it seems like Logan is like putting it out there for you. You got to be able to know what these movies are about, and how they're put together. I tell a lot of, it's really fascinating for me because when I look back, I'm originally from Memphis, which is up the road from you guys. So I'm in LA, about to go there for Christmas, but I'm from Memphis, and that's one of the things that I'm encouraging even Memphians to do is to really start to take a look at this industry. Most people do not even know that this industry exists as a business or as a possibility of work. They're used to going to work for maybe some retail stores or used to going to work. Mom and dad tell them to go to college to become lawyers and doctors and all these other kinds of things. But they don't get that push when it comes to the arts. They don't get that push when it comes to movies because the families aren't acclimated to that. They haven't been raised in that kind of environment. So one of the things that I'm doing And one of the things I'm glad that Mississippi is doing is trying to educate their youth that this industry does exist. And there's, like you said, there's opportunities behind the camera as well as opportunities in front of the camera. You know, who is the next wardrobe designer that's going to come along? Who's the next graphic designer for sets? You know, who's the next lighting person? You know, who's the next cameraman? You know, who's that guy? He might come from Mississippi. And a lot of these people, if you really look at Hollywood, they came from the South. They had an inkling to come to Hollywood, and they found their way, and they made, you know, a career, you know, in this industry. So yes, take his class. Yes, let's get some programs going where we actually train them how to make movies. We train them how to understand the various different departments that make up putting movies together. It's a great thing, and I think Mississippi is definitely doing a lot of that. I was just recently down there last year shooting Inspection in Jackson, Mississippi. So if you haven't seen Inspection, it comes out. Maybe it's already out. I think it's already out in the theaters. It's a military movie that was shot in Jackson about a young man who fought his way through the military. So fascinating, you know, movie. And while we were down there, we were pulling people into this business and training them at the same time.
Yeah. Awesome.
Alicia, I have one thing for Christopher and probably Maximus at the same time. How do we introduce this to our children in our rural community? We're not in the urban area. We are 45, 50 an hour away from movies. We don't have local theater in our area. How do we introduce this to our younger children, our 4th, 5th, 6th grade high school kids, the idea of filmmaking and film production and things like that?
Get them to make a movie. Get them to make a movie. Take their iPhone, which has a great camera, and tell them, here's the story. Go make this story. Create a narrative. Go make this story. And then let them know that, okay, if you're going to put this together, here are some departments I want you to have. I want you to have a wardrobe department. I want you to have a prop department. I want you to have a lighting crew who's going to light it for you. You know, I want you to plan it out. Do the business part of it. Plan it out. What days you're going to shoot this? What days you're going to shoot that? Who's going to be here for that day? Have them make a movie. So then they, as Spielberg is doing in his brand new movie, right? Mm-hmm. You're showing kids how to put it together. Also invite folks like me and Logan and Maximum down to your facility to do an in-person teaching.
That's what I was waiting on, a free invitation. Thank you for that free invite.
Writing it down now.
Yeah.
Awesome.
He's exactly right. You know, I spoke with Mississippi Film Office asked me to come speak to some young filmmakers here recently. And as I was speaking, you know, you could just see the hunger in their eyes. They're looking for a magic bullet. You know, they're looking for you to give them this thing on how to make it happen. And I kind of broke protocol a little bit because it pulled on my heart because I know where they are. And I just had to tell them, nobody's coming to save you. Nobody's coming to save you, especially here in Mississippi. Nobody's going to come save you.
Wow.
Everyone who is, you named the top folk, they saw my first project. I put it in front of them. They said, I don't know how you did it with that little bit of money, but nobody came to save me. I went to CAA. I went to Lionsgate. I was right there. So when I realized I didn't have enough friends, and that's why I wasn't kidding. It had nothing to do with my talent. It had everything to do with my relationships. And I didn't have enough of them to make this happen. Mm-hmm. So when I realized, I'm like, well, okay, then let's do this ourselves. Let's stop begging. And I said, we're going to make a project before the end of the year. And so I took those young filmmakers and I put them and we trained them on set. I was not formally educated. So I had to learn out there in the rough. And one thing that I found out was after I've just written recommendations for the DGA program, the Guggenheim Fellowship, I have no formal education, and these kids, people don't respect you without experience. So the only thing that we can do is put them on live projects and train them, giving them apprenticeships. So we've met with Senator Walker, and now we're trying to get stuff like workforce development done for filmmaking, because we have the greatest talent in the world in the South, bar none. They just don't know about it. A gaffer is nothing more than an electrician. So we train electricians to become gaffers. So if an interior designer can become a set designer, let's train them to do that. If they're flying cosmetologists in here to do hair from Atlanta to do projects in Natchez, and you mean to tell me they don't have enough cosmetologists in Natchez to do their own stuff? They don't realize that these are transferable skills.
There you go.
Now, since I'm starting to get the ear of politicians and start saying you're so focused on not giving folk outside money on these tax breaks, you're missing 70% of every project is in the crew. 70% of the dollars is in the crew. You're missing the bulk of the money by not investing in these young people to train and get transferable skills and work on sets. So what I've done and what our nonprofit is doing through the Jackson Film Festival is that we're bringing folk in and we're training them. We had a month-long film camp with kids with JPS last year. We shot in Vicksburg in November. We're working in Yazoo City. I'm going out into the trenches of where people are not going and developing this talent. So here's the thing, but it costs money. It's gonna take the communities to buy in. I can do my part, but we can build this infrastructure. But it's a team effort. It has to be a team effort. And I'm gonna tell you, filmmaking is the most expensive art form in the world. But we can train our kids, but it's gonna take all of us jumping in. And I'm doing my part. And I need everybody's help. We just talked with an AMC rep who we'll know by January, February, that they're gonna take the winners of our festivals and start distributing their stuff through them. And they want to create a pipeline from the young people that we're training here to start working on projects for AMC on all platforms. So we're out here doing the work. I just need some help.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Okay, so I got a filmmaker and a casting director. I think this is my audition. Do I have a change?
We already got you. We already got you, because the most important thing about making film is that it takes all kinds of faces to create that film. You know, it takes all kinds of faces to tell us where we're at in a specific film without even you saying a word. So, you know, your whole image is your journey into this whole movie making.
Awesome. Well, I'll be sending you my headshot.
Okay.
Okay.
I got to bring this up. We had Kamari Brooks. This is a young boy out of Canton, Mississippi. Wrote his first script at 14. It was phenomenal. I brought Palmer Williams in. We had a project that I was shooting. I took the money from that project and filmed this kid's first project. That changed his life.
Wow.
This kid is now wanting to be a writer. And we're going to cultivate that. We're going to keep doing it. But it's just like Brother Gray said. You got to go make a project. You can't learn how to swim unless you jump in the water. It's just no way. It's
That's
no way
it.
around.
You said it. And I hope the word is getting out, even through our distribution of this this session here. Maximus say, I need some help. And we do need, this is a call for people who have a passion, who have any kind of talent, ingenuity, desire, influence, whatever, to put it on the table to get our stories out and to develop talent. Because like you said, this is an industry, this is a business. There's money to be made in entertaining others and in telling stories. So right now I have a question, and I'm not gonna give this lady too many accolades because she will probably turn her screen off, but she is the inspiration for the Hold That Thought series. She did a blog called Cultured Commentary. And I certainly am a fan of her bravery and her talent. And Miss Deanna Hayden, like I said, she has helped us develop these themes, starting with the horror, and develop the questions so that we sound like we know what we're talking about. And I think Miss Deanna has a question. I hope she can unmute herself.
Hi, everyone. My name's Deanna Hayden. I'm a doctoral student at Howard, studying communications, culture, and media studies. And I specifically have an interest in critical film studies, Africana studies, and Black girlhood studies. So my question is just a general question about capturing the experiences of Southern communities. So I know you all probably know about, like, Katori Hall and her popularity with the show P-Valley. I've seen like a lot of television shows that have been capturing Southern life. And it's very interesting to me because it's not captured in like a stereotypical way. It's actually capturing these multiple, multidimensional aspects of Southern identity and what it means, which I really enjoy seeing on screen, because oftentimes there is this stereotypical awareness about people from Mississippi or people from Tennessee or whatever, So my question is about casting, but also about production. So since we all know that the television and film industry is wildly kind of westernized, it has like some Eurocentric beliefs and practices. Can you discuss your experiences with trying to elevate these stories that are not commonly accepted by the mainstream or big money industries? How have you been able to kind of navigate that kind of rocky terrain with trying to promote these stories that capture these very intricate parts of Southern life, or just, very intricate parts of life in general? And how does that translate into the casting process as well? Because, I was speaking to someone about their experience with casting and talking about, how do they navigate the casting world when they experience like a particular person wants a certain demographic or a certain look. But they, how does that work in terms of trying to promote an actor who doesn't fit that, that particular demographic? How does that work, and how do you push that narrative forward? So it's kind of a double-ended question, but that's my first question.
Well, first off, go Bison. I am a Howard graduate. So, awesome. Wow. My whole thrust, name of my production company is called Southern Tales, where, my thrust of my company is to tell Southern stories, and to give the world a view of what Southern life is all about. I think we're seeing more and more of them coming to play now, because people are gravitating towards those real strong earthly kind of stories that really have not been told yet. From an actor's perspective, there are a lot of actors that are reaching back. Oprah's reaching back. She tells, stories that she's used to understanding and knowing as, her growing up. Tyler Perry's out there. He's doing what he can to promote that whole Southern lifestyle, and how things actually work in the South. So from an actor's standpoint, it's that whole move that you guys got to work on, pulling that whole industry out of Atlanta to Mississippi. And if you can do that, I mean, Atlanta is like really on top of it. That's why people are gravitating there, not only because of the tax breaks, because of, the lay of the land, the ability to be able to move anywhere in Atlanta and to tell a story. So Mississippi definitely can do that, can do the same thing. I'm veering off here a little bit, but this is something I want to get out. I'm really happy to see that Mississippi's tax breaks are going to be beneficial to pulling people your way, because people are going to understand that they can have more freedom with the tax breaks than they do with the tax breaks in Atlanta. So that's something for you, Maximum, to like work on to make sure that basically happens. But the Project Teal Did anybody go see that? I hope you guys have. If you haven't, you should go see it. The Emmett Till story. That's a great story. That's depicting Southern lifestyle and what happened and how it went down, and a real strong narrative of how Mamie, the mother, went through her struggle. From an acting perspective, I'm trying to answer your question. I'm trying to go back to this whole acting thing. But from an acting perspective, a lot of us casting directors are trying to, as much as possible, to get originality by making sure we touch base with actors that can portray those stories because they live those stories and because they sound like those stories. It's that dialect, that's important to us a lot of times when casting. So it's better to get somebody that we don't have to put a coach in front of, but can just really just portray that right away by just opening their mouths. Did I answer your question? I don't know if I did or not.
Yes, yes. And that the second part was just, how do you push that forward when you're kind of working with this multi-tiered operation? Like how do you push this particular character forward? How do you push this actor forward? Because I know, for example, when I look at Katori Hall's work and I look at the characters, a lot of pushback was that these people don't sound like a typical, Mississippi person, or why are they using this accent, or, whatever the case may be. But in actuality, those characters actually do reflect a lot of the dialect that is used by people in the Mississippi, Memphis area and things like that. And so how do you make sure that you're pushing these characters forward? Because someone who, say, has lived their whole life in California and has had no experience with someone from the South or someone from Mississippi, they might not be necessarily familiar with, the characteristics of people from this area. So that was just genuinely my question, is just how are you pushing that forward in the story space, in the character space? How are you making sure that people are being seen and known, and we're not just sticking to the, typical actors that we see rotating throughout Black Hollywood?
Well, I think let me just go back and talk to you a little bit about how movies are made and how they're made within budget. A lot of times when movies are made, they're only going to bring somewhere between one to four actors from Hollywood. The other actors, they're going to make sure they get them within the local community where they're shooting, or the local state where they're shooting. That's why a lot of stuff's going to Atlanta, because you ain't got to hire all these high-paid actors. You can bring four of your major stars that are going to put your butts in the seats, that is going to help you move your story along. And then you're going to go to Atlanta, and then you're going to start hiring the Atlanta talent. You, as Mississippi, want to make sure that you do the same thing, so that when those movies or attracted to Mississippi, we now start to put the Mississippi talent before the local casting director that's going to try to, as much as possible, hire close to the city where you're shooting, because it's going to save the production money. If I don't have to put you up, if I have to put you in a hotel, pay you per diem, and drive you to and from the set, if you can just get in your car and come to set in 5 minutes, and you're a really good actor and you can portray this, we audition you, then that's how we put you into it. I'm sure a lot of that is happening. Now, the one thing about Katori, I remember when she first came to my office, she was nobody. But, she really came to Hollywood and she struggled and she made it happen. She really, really made it happen. But one thing you got to understand, a lot of what she's shooting in Atlanta. She's not shooting it in Memphis, right? That project is being shot in Atlanta. So now you got all these international people that have converged on Atlanta, that are coming with all these different dialects. So you're going to have a dialect coach that's going to have to teach you the Memphis accent. I don't get it until I go back home. I fall right back and play. But you hear what I'm saying? So we have to, if we want to grow Mississippi, we got to attract those projects there, right? And we got to mandate that not only that you hire local folks to support the supplies of your movie, but you hire the local talent. And that you, in hiring local talent, just like Atlanta does, you will get an even greater tax break. That's with actors and with everybody. So you got to mandate that those things happen. And that's how we push it forward. You know, that's how we push our actors forward.
Knowledge is power.
I
Right.
think we got to start controlling our narrative.
Right.
Come on.
We got to get more people writing, man. You got to give the casting directors something to work with by developing characters that are uniquely ours. And we have to start there. We have to start getting more people like you who have this command of the language, that understands the culture, and realize that we're not monolithic. That, you know, there are different nuances to us, and we're not just what everyone else has decided we will be. Until we tell our stories, we're not going to be able to push any character, because they're going to always tell us who we are. We determine who we are, and we have to start thinking from a place of power. Interestingly enough, one of the things we're doing, we're attracting more projects here because it's cheaper to make it here than Atlanta. We just talked to a girl from Memphis, and she won the Jackson Film Festival a couple of years ago. Unshameless plug altogether, but she also won Cannes as Best Director. But we're producing her project, and we're actually putting a casting call up for the 29th of this month, and we're going to actually start shooting a teaser so we can start raising the funds to shoot her feature. That's going to be done here. But we got to get more people to think that way. They're not going to give us respect. We're going to have to take it.
We're going to command it.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll take it. Just command it.
And earn it rightfully, because we're talking about, we have a body of unique talent, and people putting their best foot forward, not just a foot forward and expecting somebody to help you, as we said. We've really got to put forward the excellence that fits in the quality of what everybody's looking at. And it's not that we can't do it, it's just appreciation of our particular aesthetic, you know, that what we have is quality, is beautiful, is compelling, all of those kinds of things. Well, as we said, it's time to wrap. And so anybody, I don't see any last minute questions. I've dropped our donation link in the chat, and we're going to capture the emails that have been put in the chat. We certainly thank everybody for your participation. I'm going to give these guys.
Hate to interrupt. I do have one question.
I got two or three.
I do have one. Okay. This goes back to Blaxploitation movies. Despite being stereotypical in nature, and I heard Logan mention, you know, it's a money thing, but some Blaxploitation did convey meaningful messages about the plight of our people and society. So can you guys just name a few? One of mine is Cotton Comes to Harlem. You know, it was a movie that created a lot of stir. But the message behind the movie, to me, was the idea that there was a shortage in potential for raising funds or employment. People were looking for ways to create and make more money. The part that I didn't like is that we use our people to make the money. And Cotton Comes to Harlem. But can you all think of other Blaxploitation movies that convey meaningful messages inside of the movies themselves?
I think just real quick, like we talked about Sweetback, and there's a couple important points that I want to make about Sweetback. First of all, I mean, he did exactly what we're talking about. That film was made organically. It was made, I mean, in fact, within the credits, it says starring the Black community. The people who were cast in that film were part of the community where it was made. They advertised using Earth, Wind, and Fire. I mean, they didn't have the budget to like have an advertising campaign, so they used Earth, Wind, and Fire, an album essentially. So I do think, like, and I'm not saying that subsidies aren't a powerful way to bring, bring big production companies to Mississippi, but there is a case to be made for an organic film movement that arises from within our culture here and celebrates our voices outside the scope of, because the thing about, and here's my, I'm not trying to step on any toes, but Hollywood, I mean, the reason Blaxploitation trafficked in stereotypes is the same reason that horror traffics in stereotypes, same reason. I mean, it's much easier to write in stereotypes. Stereotypes are flat. It's easy to create villains. It's easy to create heroes. In the case of Blaxploitation, many of these stereotypes were incredibly harmful, because they played into, for example, like sexual stereotypes about Black men and Black women. You have the pimp figure, you have the hustler figure, you have all these different kind of types that come from they don't come from Blaxploitation, but they were definitely like kind of, what's the word? I want to use the word reified, but that's kind of jargony English talk. They were fixed. They were turned into these categories that are hard to shake free from. So the thing about having, the thing that Maximus is doing, celebrating these voices that are Mississippi voices and giving them a platform to tell their stories. I think that's incredibly important. And it's tough because that tension between art and commerce, I mean, this is something that, Mr. Gray has gestured towards. There's always going to be that tension between art and commerce.
Mhm.
I mean, that goes back to the days of patronage. When Shakespeare was making plays, he had to have somebody foot the bill if he was going to do something really artsy, really avant-garde. So, I mean, we've got to learn ways to make films that are at once marketable and, tell the kind of stories that need to be told. And that's hard to do. I mean, that's where Blaxploitation went wrong. It started out right. But, towards the end of the 70s, I mean, you're getting some really ugly films that are not, I mean, they're not doing the Black community a whole lot of favors. Anyway, there's my,
Well, a lot of it, I think that had to do is because most Black folks wasn't really familiar with what they wanted to see, and the industry was just putting something out there that would probably what they thought was just would attract their attention, but it turned out to be more harmful and led to some stereotypes that led to some folks in society trying to imitate those people. So now we have more actors that are very choosy about the kinds of roles that they want to take on. They're very conscious about, what kind of role and what does that really say to my audience. So we've come a long ways.
I agree.
Gordon Parks is like the gold standard to me, as far as directors. What we don't talk about when we start talking about Shaft saved MGM from bankruptcy. MGM was on the verge of bankruptcy until Shaft came. Badass and Shaft came out in the same year. That threw me because a lot of times I didn't know the historical context of how the films came out. But when we look at what Gordon Parks did with Shaft, when we look at how he broke the film down, how you see this beautiful Black man walking the streets with power, not dressed raggedy, but with confidence and poise and agency. And then you see how the film starts out with him walking. He's just walking and just establishing him. That was something that was new to film at that point. You want to know what film stole that? Saturday Night Fever. They stole the same setup from the beginning. When you start talking about how we revolutionize film like Superfly, when you have what's the artist that created the soundtrack for Superfly?
Curtis Mayfield.
Curtis Mayfield. Curtis Mayfield released the album. Him and Sweetback, they released their songs before the album came out. That was never done before.
And
But they did that with Saturday Night Fever.
That's a hell of an album.
They did. It was. The innovations that we've created, I know that there are a lot of things that were bad, but one thing that Dr. Candace Love Jackson talks about that I steal every time I can, representation heals trauma. We need to see ourselves. And I know, and then when Ron O'Neal talked about the backlash because Blaxploitation actually was a term that was coined by the head of NAACP. And it wasn't a positive term.
Right.
But he said, but this is the truth. This is what's really happening at that time when they started making Superfly, when they started making the Mac. Yeah, it was a part of us that we probably are ashamed today and don't care for, but that was somebody's reality. And when you start looking at the language in which they start talking about, well, what other options do we have? When you start looking at what Max Julian did, when he started talking about the plight that we're facing, yeah, that may not have been what I went through, but that was very real to them. So and when we start talking about Willie Dynamite, Gilbert Moses, this guy he was at the Sorbonne. He was formally trained. He left the Sorbonne to come back and fight for the civil rights. These are the things that we need to start teaching our kids, to start letting them know that Blaxploitation, even though there was a lot of bad, there's a lot of good that can transform our lives and transform these people. Because I grew up in Yazoo City. I didn't even know there was a such thing as a filmmaker.
Right.
The closest I came to saying, hey, that's me, is watching Gary Coleman on Different Strokes growing up. So I think we need to do more of an in-depth study of Blaxploitation. These films, yeah, it was exploited because there were white directors and writers telling the story, but there were some people like Max Julian that was telling their own stories. There were some people like Gordon Parks that was writing and directing his own story. The Learning Tree, 1969. I mean, these people were setting the standard. And even though when the establishment started seeing that, oh, there's money here, they start putting all this junk. But we owe it to celebrate those ones who really did make an impact. Because Shaft, we had never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
Amazing. I started off this conversation saying that, I have a feeling that we're going to do another similar series. And one thing my board member, Melvin Anderson, always harps on is we have this exhibit called the Rabbit Foot Minstrels. The narrative of the minstrel shows kind of mirrors the narrative and the direction that the Blaxploitation films went in. It was a genre that gets a bad rap, let's say. If you say blackface today, it's always got a negative connotation, but that's a lot of times because people don't know the actual history. And we have a very thorough exhibit, and I would love to talk about, because when Logan mentioned race films, these are all precursors to African Americans being able to put their talents on display in what you now may look at as a negative connotation, but this was employment, number one, opportunity. This is where some of our blues singers, our actors, our musicians, our costume designers, our gaffers who were the electricians. Sometimes the actors and the musicians had to also keep the bus running, So I just think that what we're talking about now is a body of knowledge that we have got to somehow package and then present to our younger audiences so that they grow up with this internalized, because there's lessons to be learned from it. Just like we end with the question, some of the positive things that came out of a genre that is often perceived as negative, because that's all people remember is the negative end of the thing, but they don't remember the positive messaging that could be gleaned from it, and the lessons learned so that you don't repeat those mistakes. So look for future invitations from certainly from Cultural Crossroads, but hopefully from other organizations. We're going to do whatever we can to support the Jackson Film Festival, and we're going to be bringing y'all down here to the Blue Barn Theater, you know, to do some hands-on things, some summer camps and that kind of thing. So just get your mind focused, because you will have invitation to come to the metropolis of Port Gibson and share your knowledge with us. Let's see. There is a question in the chat. I don't know, Christopher, are you able to see the chat?
I'm not even looking at the chat, so can you
Okay,
guys
I usually don't, but we're going to go ahead and read that question. I think it's very important, because it says, would Christopher Gray be available to participate in the Jackson Film Festival in July of 2023?
I'm so supportive.
Check your
Yes.
calendar now. I'm sure they'll be in touch. Did somebody also say drop your contact information? I'm sure they did. Yeah, we're going to get contact information. Serious inquiries only. So we love making quality connections, and I think that we have done that tonight. We have made some quality connections, and some knowledge has been exchanged. Some beautiful insights have been shared. I just really thank everybody who took time out to attend and to stick with us. Anything else that I need to say? I certainly want to reiterate Mississippi Humanities Council, Claiborne County, and the city of Port Gibson, and all of the individuals who support Mississippi Cultural Crossroads. We appreciate you, and that's the reason why we're able to do this kind of deep dive and these kinds of programs for our community, bring this talent to us.
It's awesome. That's awesome. And I'm open, I'm free to have any conversation with anyone who's on this Zoom. I love giving back. It just, I can't take it to the grave. I got to give it back to you before I go.
Come on. Okay, well then, as we exit, I'm gonna allow participants to unmute and just give a little round of applause, and we're gonna take it on home.
One thing that I want to add, for those who probably hadn't seen it, there's an excellent documentary on Netflix called "Is It Black Enough" by Evans Mitchell, and his grandmother's from Hattiesburg, and it's one of the most thorough documentaries I've seen on Blaxploitation.
Oh. Okay, go ahead.
No, that was it.
I think I might have muted you a little bit. You may have to start it over.
Yeah, I think you muted everybody.
I did. Go ahead again, Maximus. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying that there's a wonderful documentary on Netflix called "Is It Black Enough" by Evans Mitchell. And he has his grandmother's from Hattiesburg. It's one of the most thorough documentaries I've seen on Blaxploitation.
Okay.
Well, thank you guys. I've enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Yes, this was a
Unmute.
pleasure.
Y'all
Privilege.
do a collective.